Let's, however, talk about White Ribbon, where, as we've talked about for a few nights in a row here, millions and millions of dollars over multiple years went into this charity, a charity that became so synonymous with spreading the word about the unacceptable nature of domestic violence that everyone from, seemingly, the Prime Minister to a footy player was taking the pledge, wearing the badge, wearing the ribbon. Yet we learnt last week that this thing ran out of money. In fact, it ran so badly out of money that it ended up with $800,000 worth of debt. That matters because in one of its most recent years, it had $6 million worth of revenue. The year before that, $5 million. The year before that, $4 million. The year before that, $6 million. They've had plenty of money, plenty of goodwill and plenty of friends in the media. And maybe that's the reason why there's not a long conversation about what the hell happened to this organisation. I've been talking about it on the show for the past few nights, mentioning it and reinforcing it in the podcast each and every morning. And somebody who reached out to me is Robyn Nolan, and she is from the National Council of Women in Australia, and she is its president. She joins us now this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, Robyn, from Canberra. How do you feel about White Ribbon having so much goodwill, so much money, so much support, and hitting the wall in the fashion that it has?
Oh, Paul, look, first of all, thank you so much for having me on, but this is an absolute disgrace. It's a national disgrace. When you think about $6 million in revenue from corporate Australia, from community, from government, there's about 10% of that revenue came from the government. $6 million, they spent, as you said, almost $7 million. And on top of that, there's a whole lot of debts and, you know, staff wages need to be paid and all those sorts of things. But creating awareness for domestic and family violence. What about the programs on the ground? The things that we could be doing, raising awareness, I don't think is what we need to be talking about at this point in time. Most people know about awareness of domestic and family violence. We need proactive programs that are going to do something about it. Now, this organisation called itself a global social movement. A global social movement raised $6 million, creating awareness, saying that obviously men need to treat women and children appropriately. Family and domestic violence is an issue that we all should care about. Every one of us, men, women, children. Sure, some of their programs that they did in schools, they didn't actually do the school programs, by the way. They had a program of committees. We assumed that they were getting other people to do the programs. Do you know what? They had 47 staff last year. 47 staff in 2018, June 2018. When they went into receivership, they had 28 staff. 28 staff. What were they doing creating awareness? In my view, they were creating beautiful, glossy brochures, fact sheets, internet, obviously, you know, websites, newsletters. Look, let me tell you, spending the time that I do in Western Australia, and particularly in regional, rural and remote areas, I can tell you one thing. You take a glossy brochure or a fact sheet to a rural or regional or remote community in particular and show someone a glossy brochure, they can't hardly read, some of those people. What is a glossy brochure going to do?
Well, also, Robyn, it felt like this organisation had a certain worldview. Its certain worldview was of who the perpetrator was, and when the perpetrator strayed from their traditional image of a bloke with footy shorts and a blue singlet on, then they weren't all that invested in creating awareness about all of these issues. And let's be honest too, the argument about awareness is something that was a very 90s concept about things where, sure, there was a time when we weren't as attuned having public chats about mental illness or even domestic violence. But the idea that once we clicked past 2010, 2012, 2014, 16 or 18, it was still about awareness and pledges on the internet. It feels to me like a real example of the difference between people like yourself and plenty of others who are actually on the ground doing the real stuff versus the easy stuff, the tokenistic stuff, the if I say it on the internet, then somehow I've proven I'm a better person.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you totally. There is still a need, particularly in schools, to create awareness about this particular issue. But when you get out there into the communities, you need practical solutions, on the ground stuff. It is so important that we actually see the money that's raised. I mean, Corporate Australia, that's an enormous amount of money. The government has given an enormous amount of money. I mean, the first program, can I say, that was funded federally was back in 1998. John Howard funded a federal program. But since then, the federal government has put in enormous amounts of money. The state governments, the local governments put in enormous amounts of money. Corporate Australia. Where's the volunteerism in all of this? $6 million, and let me say, where is the board? There must be accountability for the board. Dare I say it, and this will get me into trouble, but I think there was more concentration on diversity than there was about making sure that we had someone who had financial accountability, someone who understood the finances of the organisation. I've been in business myself. Anyone in business knows if you spend 96% of whatever funds you have, whatever revenue you have, if you're going to spend 96% on administration and staff, you know that you're not going to be in business very long. Yeah. Let's be realistic about it.
Well, absolutely. And the very fact that you would even need to say you might be in trouble, or some idiot on Twitter will assume that you're in trouble, that in and of itself is sort of part of the problem here. Finally, what does it say to you about the lack of curiosity that seems to exist inside the wider media? And look, I don't know if the Charities Commission is doing something behind the scenes. We won't know until there's some final report that comes out here. But isn't it interesting, all of those people that were willing to jump on Twitter and say they were a white ribbon ambassador, all those politicians that were willing to wear and say things inside the parliament, yet so few have had anything to say after the charity goes bust and takes millions of dollars with it.
That's the interesting point, isn't it? I mean, everyone has been silent. There's been very little in any media, and I take my hat off to you. I say thank you very much for raising this issue. We need to have some sort of inquiry into this. You can't lose that amount of money or use that amount of money and not do something about it. That is an enormous amount of funding. And I think that government needs to look at it. Somebody needs to look at it. I'm not quite sure. The board, they should be responsible. ASIC, what are they doing? It's obviously a charity. It's still a tier 2 responsibility of ASIC. So there's got to be some accountability when it comes down to this. You cannot allow an organisation like this, spacious Sydney, North Sydney offices, calling themselves a global social movement, and all they did was supposedly raise awareness on $6 million. By goodness, that just doesn't add up, does it?
And don't
when
forget,
you think about
that's
it,
$6 million
doesn't add up.
For 1 year. $6 million for 1 year.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Robyn.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. If we can do anything for the causes that you like to advocate, you've always got a friend in us. All the best.
Thank you so much, Paul. And can I just give a shout out to all those people who've been suffering bushfires, drought. My family originally comes from country New South Wales around Wellington and Dubbo. They're doing it really tough out there at the moment, and our thoughts are with all of those people. Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Good on you, Robyn. Thank you very much. Robyn is the National President of the Australian Council for Women, the National Council for Women. It has been around for a very long time, the National Council. The specific National Council for Women has been around since the 1930s. They don't raise money, but they certainly get on the ground, as they say on their website, and they also advocate to government. So this isn't a fly-by-night organisation.